Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Edible Software. So, today we are going to round out the inventory menu options, and we kind of have done a bit of a hodgepodge situation here as the purchases and sales we followed straight through. So, now we are ending at the top. We are going to talk about the item master screen, basically go through all of its tabs and what you can see in there. And then we're going to go through a lot of the display screens and show you exactly what's happening in those display screens. So let's go ahead and start out in the item master. All right. So the very first thing in the item master to discuss is what the primary use of it. What is it made for? One of the primary uses is setting up new items. So if you needed to create new items in Edible Software, this is where you would finalize them. So what you would do first is you would actually create the initial item information under code maintenance. So the inventory. Now, this, of course, is based on, we're not talking about new categories, new data. Essentially, we're creating items for types and categories that you already have. So I'm not going to go into a full item creation scenario here. I'm mostly just talking about I have a new item that I need to set up. It belongs to a type and a category that I already have. So the types and the categories should already be set up. Your units of measure, countries of origin, everything like that should be set up already. So in the inventory items code type under file and code maintenance, I would just create my item code. As many of you know, you have an 8 character limit, can be alphanumeric. We request no special characters because that can upset stuff on the back end. But the description can be whatever you want. Description can have whatever characters you want. You have up to 35 characters to put in a full description. And then the type can be of the type is whatever type of item it is. So right now we have these as options under this particular database. So let's say pie. I'm going to go ahead and do one of my favorites, pecan pie, and we're going to link that under pies. Right. So after you have created your item under code maintenance, you would come then into inventory item master, click new on the right side, and here we can see all of our items that haven't been finalized in the system yet. So I would go ahead and select that item, click OK, and it would bring all of my information at the top. So my code, my description. Uh, if I have brands already created in the system, I can go ahead and select it and assign it to a brand. If I don't, I can create the brand from here. I'm going to do that in just a little bit when I talk about groups, so we'll skip that for now. And then the UOM is going to be selected in just a sec when I come into the units tab. Pack size, I can go ahead and put in a pack size. So let's say if I'm talking about cases, I know I have 4 pies to a case, so I'm just going to say 4 by 1. If I can type, there we go. And then of course we have the category and the type, so you can update the type here if need be. And then if you have a subtype, which is just like brands, it's an item group, you can go ahead and change that there. But again, I'm going to come back to that in just a bit. So I'm going to come to the units tab. I'm going to go ahead and select my master unit. Well, actually, before I do that, I'm going to choose the weight classification. The weight classification is what controls what type of item this is, or basically how it's priced and how it's sold. So if I have this set as a none item, no weight classification, I can still set up pound as an alternate if I wanted to. The main thing about a none item is that whatever you buy and sell in, that is the pricing and cost unit of measure. So if I buy in cases, I am paying so much per case. If I sell in cases, I price per case. Or if I break down and sell in eaches, I am I am pricing by eaches. Same thing, like I said, if I wanted to set up pound, even though this is a none item, I set up pounds, but I'm going to sell so many pounds. I'm not worried about units. I'm just selling 50 pounds, and I am pricing by the pound. So just bear that in mind. You cannot mix and match units as far as pricing and what you are actually using. The other options are catch weight. Catch weight, of course, is your variable weight item. I'm going to go through these a little bit more when I can pull up some items to look at. But essentially, catch weight is variable weight. It means that I am selling my units, but I am pricing by the pounds. And the pounds will always be different. So whether or not I am purchasing so many cases of this item, and the total weight is whatever it needs to be. I have to enter in my total weight when I receive, which we've already gone through on the receiving. And then, of course, allocation on the sales side we've talked about as well. I specify how many units and how many pounds. But no matter what, I am pricing by the pound or pricing by the weight. And then net weight, as far as pricing goes, acts the same way. No matter what I am buying and selling in, I am pricing by the weight of. I'm pricing by the weight or pricing by the pound, whatever the weight is. The only difference is that is a fixed weight item, so I don't have to indicate how many pounds I'm selling. Based on how you've set it up, that is going to be the weight that is selected. Again, I will select some other items to show you that a little bit later. So right now I'm just going to set up a very quick none item. I buy in cases. Master unit should always be what your largest unit is. Recommended your receiving unit because you typically will break down from there. So I buy in cases, and if I don't need anything else, if this is case in, case out, I can click save and move on. However, if I wanted to, I can go ahead and click add and go ahead and add my individual units if I happen to break down. So I put in, all right, sorry, I put in my unit, and I'm also going to specify how many of those units equals this master. So this factor will always be the number of units to the master. As you will see later on when I choose some catch weight items, we might show an inverse here. Again, I will explain that in just a bit. But I have already indicated 4 eaches to a case, and that is all I need. Some of this other information I'll talk about in just a second, but I wanted to just get through the setup. So after that, if I wanted to set up some alternate information, if I have a UPC number, if I wanted to put in gross weight or net weight, if I wanted to put in dimensions and volume or pallet configuration, I do have the ability to do that. And this information I can update at any time. The only things that you cannot update once the item has been used. Once the item's been saved, you can still change information around. But if it's been used in any transaction, purchases, transfers, sales, what have you, you cannot update the master unit, the weight classification. If I haven't used the alternate, I can update the alternate. But if I have used the alternate, like if I've sold eaches out of this case, then that locks that in. I cannot change the code or the factor. So the only thing that I could do is inactivate. But some of these other options like breakdown, pack size, this information mentioned, I can change it anytime. So I'm going to go ahead and click save, and that's all I need to do. So that was just a really quick step-by-step on how to create new items. Again, with catch weight items and net weight items, there is a little bit more, but we are going to have a more in-depth conversation about setting up new data in a different training. So let's go ahead and move on as to what is happening in the item master. So that was one primary option, is to create new items in the item master. Now, of course, it has other primary options. Basically, what's happening for this item in the system, what's going on with this item. So I'm going to go through each tab and kind of show you some of this information. So with an item selected, I'm going to go ahead and choose one that I know has some transactional history. So to select an item that already exists in the system, I can hit select. Or if I wanted to select something that I know has inventory available, I can hit select quantity. And that will just filter based on available quantity. So I'll go ahead and choose this bouquet. And we can go ahead and move from here. So This inventory tab is initially going to show you what's happening with this item in the entire database. So this is not warehouse specific, this is the entire database. Here's my total inventory per the master unit. So anytime you see these numbers, it is typically per the master unit. Delivered and unbilled is going to be any quantity that has been shipped but has not been marked as billed yet. So any sales that have gone out but have not hit your AR. So your total inventory minus your delivered slash unbilled gives you your total on hand. Your total on hand is essentially what is sitting in the warehouse physically. So your total on hand is 53. And of course, on your total on hand, your committed, your unbilled, you see that my mouse does turn into a little magnifying glass. Of course, this gives you the ability to drill down if you double click. So I can look at more information as to what is feeding into that number. So here I have a total on hand quantity. So if I double click on that, I can see all of my lots that show up or that make up that total. So I can see my my PO information, my receive date, lot number, all of that good stuff. And of course, if I wanted even more information, I could double click on the lot number, and it will bring me to this lot information screen. And from here, I can see transactions, harvest information if I have harvest information, claims, notes, what have you. All right. So your total on hand minus your on hand committed. So your on hand committed, of course, is the inventory that is committed to sales orders or committed to transactions. Even though it's physically sitting in the warehouse, it is claimed. So that, of course, or your total on hand minus your on hand committed gives you your on hand available. Your on hand available is, of course, whatever's sitting in the warehouse that doesn't have a claim to it. So this is really what you have available to sell in the system, or I should say, physically available to sell in the warehouse. We do have another calculation, which I'll bring up in just a bit, about available to sell, which considers not only what's physically available, but what is on order, which is down here. So your purchase orders information gives you your total quantity on order. So we have 20 cases that are, or 20 bouquets, I apologize, that are coming in. It gives me my sales orders allocated to open purchase orders. So basically any commitments to what is coming in, and then unallocated sales orders. So I have this bouquet, I have 45 bouquets sitting on sales orders, but I have not allocated yet. So that is what this number is considering. So this gives me my quantity on order available to sell is negative 25. These two things combined make up your available to sell calculation. All right. Now, as you can see, of course, I have more drill down opportunities like what is on order, where's it coming from, what are my unallocated sales orders, so I can see those there. And then the 53, the on hand available calculation. I wanted to save that because when I double click on this, it's going to open up my lot information screen or my active lot screen. The reason I love this screen, if you ever have an issue where you don't know where inventory is going, or maybe it says in process but you're not exactly sure where, I love opening up this screen because I can drill down to that individual lot and I can see what transactions this lot belongs to. So let's say here I can see I ordered, I received 15, but now I have 10 available. Okay, where did the 5 go? So I go ahead and click transactions with that lot selected. And here I can see, oh, okay, I had an inventory adjustment out. So this transaction screen is allowing you to see all of the, all of the transactions that you have made for this item, whether it be inventory adjustments, transfers, sales, anything like that. Now, of course, you can see the other information like cost detail, which we have seen in previous screens, and then PO detail, which we just saw a little bit earlier for the lot information. Right, so that's a really great screen for troubleshooting or just taking a look at what's happening with specific lots. Now we do have other options down here, like these buttons, the calendar, which will basically show you just very, for lack of a better term, major numbers. It's showing you what your beginning balance was for this item, what transactions may have occurred on certain days, what transactions may have occurred on certain days. So it gives you your ending balance as well. So like here, I can see my beginning balance was 53. I removed or I added in 5 cases, so I ended up with 58. But then I had the exact opposite on the next day. I removed 5, so I ended up with 53 again. Now, of course, this again would show you any transactions as far as, again, this is database, so this is not warehouse specific. So it would be pretty much sales orders, adjustments, or anything like that. Right. The inventory tab is going to show you a lot of the same, or sorry, the inventory button is going to show you a lot of the same information that we see in here, but now we get to drill down per warehouse. So as you can see, here I see all of my information, but I'm seeing it only per the selected warehouse. And of course, if I double click on any of these, it's just going to take me to the tab that correlates to it. So let's say total on hand, it's going to open up this on hand tab and show me that same information that I saw earlier. Um, but of course, I can just cycle through these tabs very easily. Purchases due in, delivered and unbilled, my on hand amounts, my allocated amounts, my on hand available amounts, and then any unallocated sales orders. Now, one thing that you can do in here, again, is a very nice troubleshooting situation, is if for some reason you notice that you have a lot that shows available quantity, but you cannot allocate to it. Maybe in the lot allocation screen, it's not showing as available, even though it's showing available in other areas. If you've noticed that the transactions look fine and you don't have anything open, then it might be that something is marked as in process. So there might be reasons why something's marked as in process, but if I double click on that quantity, so let's say um, right now I don't have anything in process, but if I double click on that quantity, it opens up the reserved inventory table or the reserved inventory screen. So I can see that lot up here. I can see how much is reserved and if there's a transaction tied to it. Sometimes there are certain transactions like open packouts or open transfers that may not appear in that initial transaction screen. So we need to see that we can see that information in here. Now, so that's a good, that's just more really good troubleshooting options and drill down options that you can take a look at. So this is just the last area that you would take a look at if for some reason you were having trouble allocating to that particular lot. All right. So of course, that was the inventory tab. So we're going to go ahead and move on from here. Cost and sales, pretty straightforward. You can choose a date range, and within this date range, after you refresh, it is going to show you your total quantity purchased and total quantity sold. Again, all based on this master unit of measure. It's going to show you the total amount purchased and sold in dollars, and then of course, it's going to show you your average cost and your average sale amount per that unit. And then if you have any other information such as last cost, market cost, anything like that, it will show you all that information. I'm going to go ahead and skip these tabs down here. We don't necessarily use them anymore, so we're going to skip that for now. If you do have any questions, let me know, and I can go ahead and answer those questions later on. So back to the units tab. Of course, like I said, we can edit certain information. So I know this item has been used already. So if I tried to change that, it would tell me cannot happen because we have purchase orders and other things that reference that unit. But I can add in a UPC code if I need to. If you needed to add in a UPC code for an item, it will tell you once you click enter and choose the type of UPC. So these are the GTINs or the UPC codes that we accept or the different types of UPCs that we accept. So if I hit enter it's going to tell me if my check digit is wrong. So I can just go ahead and delete. I click save. Oh, but if you do get that message, it will set it to unknown. So I will have to set that again. Again, gross weight and net weight you can change at any time. Suggested retail price, if you do use that, you can set that here. This is the main area that suggested retail price is being used, unless you are using overrides, which again is a totally separate area of the system. But this is the main area where you will set up your suggested retail price. Again, dimensions and volumes for your unit, and pallet configuration for purchase orders. And then, of course, any factors that you might have. Now, I'm going to go ahead and select a catch weight item for us to look at just to show you. As you can see, the catch weight item is set up a little bit differently based on what we did earlier. The master unit is always pound. Again, we are always taking into consideration the weight of the item. So pound is the master unit, and then the um, factors are the actual units, the tangible units that we're buying and selling in. So in here, as you can see, it's showing the inverse of the factor because I can't have multiple cases fitting into pounds. That doesn't make sense. So if I needed to look at this a little bit further, when I am in edit mode, I can right click on the factor and that brings up our conversion calculator. This is what you will bring up if you are setting up a net weight from scratch. When you first add in this unit, you will right click on the factor and bring up the conversion calculator. From there, you can say one case equals so many pounds. So I can see, okay, it's 18 pounds per case on average. Again, this is the average weight. Now, this one's a good one because let's say, all right, I have another one that I break down, but I have so many eaches in a case. So I want to make sure that I set that there. And I don't want to have to calculate, okay, pounds per each, and then I had pounds per case. That may be a little bit confusing. So I do the same thing. I right click and I can see, all right, here I have so many pounds per each. But if I was first setting this up, I could say how many cases equals an each. So here I could see, I could actually set that up. Now I wouldn't be able to change this right now because I'm sure that I have used eaches in the system. But when you were initially setting that up, you could go ahead and say, okay, 6 eaches per case. So based on the factor for the case, it will automatically calculate the weight or the average weight. And then the only other thing that you have to set up for catch weight items is this preferred UOM. So you have to specify at least one quantitative unit of measure as the preferred UOM. Because pound is set up as the master, the preferred UOM essentially acts as the secondary master so that we are always keeping track of at least one tangible unit and the poundage. And just to explain that further, here is the inventory tab for a catch weight item. As you can see, it shows me those tangible units as well as my weight units. All right. Again, you have other information that you can add in for these units of measure. Breakdowns, we'll talk about a little bit later, but essentially it allows you to enter in a breakdown percentage or breakdown dollar amount if you wanted an upcharge for breaking the master unit or breaking the preferred unit. So as you can see, for a catch weight, I cannot do anything for the case because that is my main unit of measure. But if I was to sell in eaches and I wanted to upcharge, I could do that in here. Again, another conversation later on. And then, of course, you do have the ability to put in pack size or UPC numbers per unit of measure. So I could have a different UPC number for the same item, but a different unit. And then we have gross weight, dimensions, and volume here, and everything like that. So go ahead and click save. Preferred retail and preferred wholesale UOM, those do affect certain reports if you are reporting on that. So if you wanted to specify a preferred retail or preferred wholesale unit of measure, you could do that as well. And of course, if you had multiple weights for catch weight item. If you had multiple weighted units of measure, let's say you sell in pounds as well as ounces or in kilograms as well, you would want to go ahead and choose your default weight unit of measure as well. Right. The vendors tab is very straightforward. We have discussed during our purchases during our purchases training that you can set a priority vendor in here. So that is one thing that you can do in here is set up a priority one vendor for those different screens and reports that filter by that information. However, the main purpose is just showing you the vendors that you have purchased this item from and showing you last purchase information. So here we can see I have bought this item from 4 different vendors. It shows me the the quantity in units that I have bought, and it shows me the last purchase date, the cost, and all of this good information, vendor item code or anything like that. Now, of course, this is not going to duplicate for your vendor. It's simply going to update. So if I bought again from River City Produce, it would go ahead and just update this last purchase information. So that's essentially what this screen is mostly for, is just showing you that information. Same thing on the customer side. It allows you to see the customers that have purchased this item from you, and it shows you their last sale date. So the date that we sold it to them, the quantity in cases, the last price. And if this item is marked as standard on the customer master file, which we'll get to in a little bit later, is we'll show a check mark in here. And then down here, any SRP information that we might have. All right. So groups. So now we will get to brand and subtype that I was talking about, but groups in general. So to talk about the groups tab, this is purely just showing you what groups this item belongs to. So I have a pricing group set up that this item belongs to, so that is the only group that it belongs to right now. So if this item belonged to a taxing group or multiple general groups or anything like that, it would show all of those in this tab. So that's essentially what this is for. However, it does allow me to jump straight into the manage group screen from here. Now this is the same thing. If you were to click this, it is the same thing as going to inventory and item group setup. It's the same exact screen, just a different way to get there. So I click manage groups, and here it brings up the item group setup screen, and I'm going to make this a little bit larger so that we can see this. So here, show a little bit more information. There we go. So the group type is essentially what sort of group is this, as is mentioned by the name. So the general group is basically a many-to-many relationship. I can set up a general group for anything that I want to. I can have a single item mapped to multiple general groups. So I can have, if I had a meat general type, but then I also had a brisket general type, I could have this same brisket item that I'm looking at assigned to both if I wanted to. So general groups can be anything, and this is purely for reporting. General groups are purely for reporting and sorting. Pricing, however, has a separate option. Of course, it does help you filter reports if you wanted to. However, it is for pricing. So if I was doing my pricing by item groups, I would need to set up a pricing group, add those items to a pricing group, and that is how I map my pricing of my items to certain customers. um, Now, of course, the pricing group and pretty much anything below general group follows the same rules. It's a many to one relationship. So I can have many items uh, sitting in a single pricing group, but I cannot have a single item like this steak pies or this beef patty. I cannot have this item fit into multiple pricing groups. So as you can see, this is beef, but I have meat and everything like that. So I cannot have a single item between different groups. or different pricing groups. If you wanted to see who set up this group and everything like that, I can see this information tab. All right. Discounts, the same thing. They are, if you do use discounts, it's just a way of handling certain discounts for certain items and customers. So it's a way to map that. Now, all of this is based on your settings. You may not use groups for discounts or pricing or taxing. So just bear in mind, this is purely for those who might actually use that. So again, same thing with taxing. If we have certain groups that are taxed in the same way, or certain a group of items that are taxed in the same way, we can set up a taxing group for those. So now to brand and item subtypes. So again, they follow the same rules as the other ones that we just mentioned. It's a many to one relationship. So if you have an item that might be fall under the same brand, the one that I use as an example is banana. I might have Dole or I might have Chiquita. So I would actually have to set up a banana item code for Chiquita and a banana item code for Dole. So just bear that in mind if you are going to use brands or haven't used brands and plan on using brands. That is the way Edible is set up right now. And then item subtype is actually a little bit different. So subtype is actually linked to a type of item. So if I click new, actually I'm going to go ahead and do general really quickly just to show you how very easy it is to set up a new group. You choose your group type, whatever it may be. I'm choosing general right now just as an example. I click new. I have a 6-character group name that I want to do, so I'm just going to go ahead and put in test. And then the description, of course, can be up to 35 characters and can be as descriptive as you want it to be. And then I just go ahead and select those items that I need to link to that test group and click save. One other thing about groups is, as I've talked about in the item master, there's certain information that you can't change if it's been used. Groups is not that. Groups allows you to change whatever information that you want to at any time. I can remove items from groups. I can add items to different groups as long as they're not conflicting in the other group types, but there's no hard and fast rules on the groups. And I can even delete a group, even if it's been used in a report or a transaction. So that's just the normal groups. Any of these follow the same way. You set up that group name, description, and link those items. Now the subtype is a little bit different. When I click new, it's going to ask me to select a item type. So it's not just selected to, or it's not just linked to an item. It's actually linked to a type. And from there, I can specify that subtype for individual items linked to that original type. So that's me being expressive. So I go ahead and select that item, click save. So now, even though the pork ribs and the split brisket belong to the same original type, which is the smoked meats, it only the brisket belongs to this group type, or this subtype, I should say. All right. So here, as I've updated, I can see those that group screen or that group list updating. So that was kind of a two for talking about the groups tab as well as the group setup screen. The miscellaneous screen allows you to see different miscellaneous information or enter or update different miscellaneous information about the item. Here we have a permanent item note that will print out on invoices. Excuse me. All invoices, no matter what customer. Alternate description. If your warehouse crew knows this item by a different description, then you can go ahead and enter in an alternate description as needed. This right now pretty much just prints out on the pick ticket, but that is essentially what it is used for. Freight rate schedule, we're going to skip for right now because that is something more to do with pricing. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Harmonized tariff symbol, type of packaging, and duty. If you do import any of your inventory and you need to enter that information, this is where you would enter that here. And then if type of packaging does have the drop down list because that is actually set up under file and code maintenance. So you would set up your different types of packaging in code maintenance and then link them to the item in here. Buyers, as we have mentioned in some of our, in I believe our purchases, uh, sorry, our purchases and everything like that, we have a buyer per purchase order, but we can also link a buyer to an inventory item. And that does affect certain reports. Certain reports are based on the buyer linked to the item. Some reports are based on the buyer linked to the purchase order. So bear that in mind. If you do have a buyer, you can link that to a specific item so that you can control those reports, as well as see how much inventory has been bought by this buyer for this item. Country of origin is and the buyer. Right now, we don't have anything set up. That is set up in file personnel with a buyer code. So that person will need to be set up previously in order to link to the item. Then the country of origin is set up under code maintenance. So you would set that up first and then link that country of origin here. This right now, based on our settings, I am only using country of origin per item. That does initially follow PTI regulations. However, we do give you the ability to assign country of origin per receiving lot. That, of course, is a system setting. Uh, and that is a setting in here that you could do per item if you wanted to. So, whether you're setting up a country, like a default country of origin that you may change at the time of receiving, or whether you're setting up a country of origin for the item indefinitely, this is where you would set that up. Slot number, if any of you keep track of slot numbers, right now we are running on our non-slotting module. Other slotting modules we'll talk about in a different training. But if you are using slots for their basic purpose, you have a warehouse set up with different slot locations and you always have this item in the same slot, then you will go ahead and set up that slot number here. And if you have a breakdown slot, if maybe the each is and sorry, maybe the each is in a different slot, you can enter that as well. PLU code, open field if you want to enter in a PLU code for an item. Internal add-ons we talked about previously in the add-on training, so I won't go strictly into that, but this is where you would put in that internal add-on amount per the master unit. And then, of course, we have some other options here. Allow this item to be sold at zero price. Print on packout slip. So if this item is a item made and you needed to print out on a packout slip when generating a sales order, you would want to go ahead and make sure you check that. The print on price sheet. This is selected by default. If you do not want this item to print on price sheet, then you would want to go ahead and uncheck that. However, I do recommend you leave it checked if you use any of our other modules like Edible Store or anything like that. This is a required check option for those other modules. You can mark an item as a finished product or a WIP item. Again, we talked about that more in our packout training previously. So if you need any more information about that, please go ahead and look up that training. Of course, a finished product is a finished good. A WIP item is a work in process item. These do not affect anything except that raw materials grid that we were talking about in that previous training. Exclude customer or exclude from customer last price override. If you are using last price as an override, which is something we haven't talked about yet, but if you are using that as your override, you could choose to exclude certain items from that. You can say, all right, I don't want the last price to show up for this item. I always want this to come in at zero so that my people know to enter something in, or whatever the case may be. That's just an example I brought up. You can require expiration date for an item. So anytime that you receive it or make it in a pack out or pack and transfer, I would also say, is you would have to enter in an expiration date for that item. It would not it will not allow you to post or receive it until you do. Now you can go beyond that and also auto populate the expiration date. So if I am auto populating, it'll take the receive date or the pack out date, and I can say add 30 days, and that will be my calculated expiration date. The miscellaneous 2 tab allows you to, excuse me, if we're talking about if we're talking about a catch weight item, we have different ways to prepare it for physical inventory. We can use the average weight by using the factor. So that's basically saying, however, whatever the factor is set up in Edible Software, or I'm sorry, in this Item Master Units tab, that's going to be the default weight that shows up when I enter the item into a physical inventory. Or I could use the average weight of so many number of receivers. So I can go ahead and look at my lots and say, all right, I'm going to calculate five 5 lots, see the average weight and calculate it by that. Or same thing with weeks. So it's the same exact principle, just a little bit different. All right. From here, we've talked about this one already as well. The par levels that you can set up in the system. So if you always wanted a certain number of units on hand, then you can say order when on hand is less than. And if I dip below that, reorder so that it brings me back up to this amount. So the example I always use is 50 and 100. So if I dip below 50, then bring me when I print that inventory reorder list, which is what this controls, then order however much I need to bring me back up to 100. Um, excuse me. We haven't gone through the GL yet, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on this. But uh, if you wanted to specify different GL unit or GL accounts per inventory item, then you could set up different GL accounts here. So right now it's set to default. So our inventory account is our default inventory account. Sales is our default sales. COGS is our default COGS. However, if you wanted to report that separately, you could go ahead and specify those different accounts. Again, different conversation for a different time. This just gives you certain information as to who created this item and when, and if it was last modified. If we imported this through our data import spreadsheets, then typically you would see nobody listed and 1900 date on here. Pack out line, we'll talk about a little bit later. Essentially, it does allow you to track items per pack out line. I don't want to get into too much information on that, so I'm going to go ahead and skip it for right now. I believe that's going to be coming up a little bit more in our next training. In the notes tab, you do have 2 different notes that you can enter in. You can enter in internal item notes. So pretty much this note appears here and nowhere else. So I can enter in any internal item notes that I want to, or I have purchase order reminder notes. So this note, if you have one, will pop up anytime you add this item to a purchase order. So if I click add, I enter in the note down here in this white field down at the bottom and click save. So anytime I add this note, anytime I add this item to a purchase order, this note will pop up reminding me of whatever information. So it might be a situation, hey, make sure to check the count. Hey, make sure to check the quality because it goes bad really quickly. Something like that. Picture, you do have the ability to add pictures into the system. For those of you who are running on the cloud, there is a separate step involved. So it will not be as simple as what I'm showing right now. But for those of you who are not on the cloud, you do have the ability just to select a file directly from or browse directly from your computer. So that is an option if you wanted to show pictures here. They do pretty much just show in here. So these pictures do not correlate to Edible Store as of right now. They are completely internal right here. And then again, for any of you cloud clients who do want to know a little bit more about how to set up pictures for your cloud database, please email me and I can give you those steps. Suggested substitutes. So suggested substitutes, if you sell any items and you have a suggested substitute for it. Basically, if I am selling 10 cases of something, I'm actually going to pull up a different item for this really quickly. So I got these different bouquets, right? So let's say I intend on selling this Emerald Elegance bouquet, but maybe I don't have enough. So anytime that I don't have enough, I notice that the summer bouquet looks fairly similar, or it serves the same purpose. So a lot of our produce clients, many of you who sell limes or lemons, you might have different types of limes or lemons, and you might have, if you run out of the initial one, you might have a pretty decent substitute. Um, so what you can do is add that substitute item in here and put up a factor. So if it's a 1-to-1, it's the same number of limes or the same number of lemons to each item. Excuse me. Uh, then you just put it as a factor of 1. But maybe this one's a little bit different, and it takes 2 bags to really meet uh, whatever this might be. So you can go ahead and change that factor as needed. So as I've shown you in the sales screen as well as some of the other sales screens, you do have the ability to enter in substitutes, and when you choose one, it'll not only bring in that substitute, but will bring in the necessary amount based on the factor. And then, of course, ingredients. This will go ahead and you can set up different ingredients. If this is a finished good, you do have the ability to enter in ingredients for this item. So if this was a soup or something like that, you can go ahead and put that information in. Any allergens that it may have, allergens are actually another item set up under code maintenance. So you could set up allergens under code maintenance and link them to that item here. So if there's any, peanuts or tree nut or whatever the case may be. And then if you do track kosher status, you can go ahead and specify what is the kosher status. Is this kosher dairy, kosher meat, non-kosher? And you can enter in the certificate and the authority as well. All right. So, and then of course in this screen, you can print this out or email it to anybody that you need to. So that is essentially the item master. So what I want to do from here, items maintenance screen. This one is actually a new one, so I'm going to skip this one for now. And anyone who wants more information on it, please feel free to contact me, and we'll take a look. We'll take a look together. So we talked about the item group setup. I'm going to skip the display screens really quickly and talk about the hold or unhold lots. So the unhold lots option, and I believe we've come here very briefly before when we talked about purchases. But as you know, in the purchase order screen, you can put an item on hold for any reason. If there's maybe a discussion about the quality, if there's a discussion happening about the price, and you don't want it to sell, for any reason that you do not want this item to be removed from the system through a sales order or anything like that, or just to be used in any sort of transaction, we can put it on hold. So I can go ahead and do that from the purchase order itself, or come to the inventory unhold lot screen and click edit and choose which lot I want to. Now, of course, I can filter this list by vendor. I can filter this by receive date. But here I can say, all right, this particular lot, and it is based on the lot. It's not actually holding up the entire item. But for this lot, I'm going to go ahead and put that on hold and click save. You will still be able to see this lot through the system, but you will not be able to use it or allocate to it or anything like that. And it will show in this purple to indicate that it is an on hold lot. And then, of course, for any lot that you now are going to use that was previously on hold, all we need to do is come back into the screen. We can filter this to only display restricted lots. Click edit, and then we just uncheck what we need to release from the hold. So very straightforward as far as placing things on hold or off hold. And of course, you always have the ability to do that directly from the PO as well. Lock unlock screens or lock unlock lots we're going to talk about a little bit later when we get more into the consignment uh, or consignment training, because consignment is a little bit different. A lot of the features are the same, but going through the consignment liquidation process, we're going to talk about it in a different training. So this is part of that, just so you know. So anyone who sees this and is wondering about it, it is purely for a step in the consignment process. The maintain item slot numbers screen. So you don't have to go into each individual item on the item master to change the slot number. You can go ahead and just maintain them from here. So here I see all of my items listed, and I can go ahead and click edit and just start maintaining or updating slots. So again, that is simply if you need to do that or if you plan on using the slots. You can also filter by slot numbers or by inventory items. So you can of course use it as a review screen to print and export as needed. All right. So the last part of this is the display inventory screen or the display screens. So a lot of these screens show you the same information just in different ways. So I'm going to show you most of them. I'm going to show you most of the layouts because a lot of them have different layouts. But I may be a little bit quicker. So if there is any layout that you need a little bit more information on, again, please contact me and we'll go through that. The first screen, however, is a little bit different. The active inactive inventory by warehouse. So this screen allows you to activate or inactivate items per warehouse. So if I wanted to, I click edit, I can click here. So on the particular item, so based on the item I have selected, on the right side, I can see the warehouses it is active for. So if I wanted to inactivate it for a particular warehouse, I can't transfer it to that warehouse. I can't sell it out of that warehouse. I can't do anything for that item in that warehouse. I would go ahead and just uncheck it and click save. Or before I click save, I can just move on to the next one. So I can make multiple updates. And when I click save, it will mark those items or it will mark those changes that I made. So instead of having to inactivate an item completely, maybe I want it active in a certain place. Or if you're using multiple warehouses, I want to make sure this item is never used in this particular warehouse. So for whatever reason, that is what this screen is for. All right. The first display screen is just this inventory. So under inventory, display inventory, inventory, very straightforward. It is showing you for all warehouses or for individual warehouses, whatever you want. You can click refresh and see all of your items in that warehouse. And you can choose to display only active items for that warehouse. So again, you can utilize what we just talked about. And this is just showing you all of that same information that we saw in that inventory screen. Shows you your on hand available, unallocated amounts. And just like in those screens, I can double click on that amount and open up and see more information. So I have a lot of drill down opportunities in here. Now, of course, if I wanted to jump to a specific item, I could go ahead and just put my focus in the item code area and just start typing in the code. So I just start typing in and it goes straight down there. Same thing with the description. If I just start typing in the description, it takes me right down to the description that I want. Now, of course, it's showing you initially in the master unit measure, and if you have any breakdowns or any different units of measure, mostly for catch weight items, it's going to show you the preferred unit of measure over here. Another thing that you can do, other than just, of course, seeing this information, is you can recalculate certain lots. So if you noticed an issue with a particular lot, it showed available in here but didn't show available in another area, this would be one of the first areas that we would say go to. Select that lot and do not recalculate all, because recalculate all is going to recalculate everything in this screen. But if you wanted to recalculate a specific lot, you can hit recalc. We do have the recalc all option if that is needed, but that is going to run through all of your data. So bear in mind, if you recalc all by accident, it might take a pretty long time for that to finish. And then, of course, I went ahead and if you double click on the on hand available, it's going to take you to the same screen. But if I click lots, as you can see, it opens up the same screen. And then, of course, the flash is that same screen that we saw earlier in the item master. Oh, this one actually opens up the item master. I apologize. So typically the flash screen is referring to that inventory button, as we saw in the inventory adjustment screen or some other screens. But so if I click flash in here, it's opening up the item master with that item selected. So again, that is the inventory display screen. It's going to show all of your items no matter what. You can jump down by typing in the item or the description if you need to, but it's still going to show everything. And then, of course, I can export this to Excel, and it will be what you see is what you get. So it'll look exactly like the grid. All right. The next one is the inventory display inventory comparison monitor. Now we do have a particular layout that most people like to work with. I will show you or explain to you what some of these other layouts allow you to do. But as you can see, one of the first things that you can do in here that you couldn't do in the original inventory screen is select an item. And then, of course, you could go beyond that and select specific types, categories, or groups. So you can filter this screen however you need to, even by priority one vendor. Now you can compare as well. So this is a comparison screen, so you can compare between two different warehouses. Display only active items. Do not show items with zero quantity, so different filter options, or include zero quantity where the last sale was this date. And then we also have a color coding here based on the number of units that show. So if you wanted to change that, if you wanted to say, okay, I'm never going to have more than 200 units, so let's say, okay, 1 to 20, and then 21 to 40, and then 41 to 60, and then 61 and above. I'll click refresh. So that is showing me all of my items, and it's showing me the amounts that exist. Again, based on the master unit measure, is showing me the amount that exists in warehouse 1 and warehouse 2. So here I can see this bright summer bouquet I actually have in 2 different warehouses. And then for other warehouses, it's giving me just a straight total. So if you work with more than one, or I apologize, more than 2 warehouses, it is just going to give you a total for the last bit. And then, of course, the inventory comparison monitor, you can actually set on a timer. So if I wanted to, every 2 minutes, it's going to auto refresh. I don't have to go in and manually click the refresh button, it's going to auto refresh for me as I'm working through the system. So, and of course, I can collapse this to get a little bit more real estate, and then just move this to the side. And I can work in the system with this open. I can still open up any other screens that I want to. The other layouts we have show a lot of the same information. Um, of course, this one is not showing code; it's just showing brand and description. So a lot of these are changed by very minute differences, but these were options that people had selected. So here we have another one where it's showing you description brand. It's showing you the amounts for 2 warehouses, and then of course we can select other warehouses beyond that. So if I click refresh, and then I have 2 different color options. I have option 1, which is the same thing that we saw earlier, and then option 2, whether something is partially on hold or on hold. All right. And then we have some another option here to not show in transit column. Uh, so these are just in transit, meaning they are part of some open transfers or something like that. Excuse me. So the other layout, layout 4, allows you to see a lot more information, shows you the item code description, shows you a lot of the same information we saw on the other inventory display screen. Um, and then it shows you the in transit information over here. And then, of course, this is going to be based on all warehouses or a single warehouse. And then the last one, layout 5, is the most popular. Um, what it allows you to do is it doesn't compare between warehouses, so you are going to select an individual or all warehouses. But again, you do have the ability to select your items, select by priority vendor, select by buyer or by seller. You can display this one. You have the ability to display catch weight items in preferred UOM. So now we're displaying in cases rather than pounds, and some of the same information as before. And we have that on hand available as of calculation. So this is really affecting our available to sell calculation. So here I see all that same information I've seen before, my on hand, my allocated. I do have the ability to drill down and see that information, and it shows me in process, but it also gives me that available to sell calculation as well. All right, so that is one of the more popular display screens that we have is the inventory comparison monitor. And just go back really quickly, you do have some of those other display screens to see as well, the lots, the flash, so the same screens that we were talking about earlier, and then the item display. The item display is actually another display screen that we're going to get to in just a sec, so I'm going to skip that for right now. Right. Inventory pricing monitor is the same thing as layout 5 for the comparison monitor, as you can see. However, we do show pricing information. So this display screen is better used for salespeople who really need to might need to pick up a customer price on the fly. Not only do they need to see price, they might need to see cost, and we can display cost as needed. Um, but they can also see prices for those customers as well. So a lot of the same information, just extra information beyond there. And just like showing different warehouses, if we had different price levels to show, we can show between different, we can show the same item and the price per, I apologize, the price per price level. So anyway, and again, price level we'll talk about a little bit later when we get into the pricing. But that is essentially the screen. And again, you can enable that timer so your salespeople can stay in this screen. They can collapse that to get a little bit more real estate and work through the system while this is continually refreshing. All right. The item display screen, which is that same button that I was talking about just a second ago. So it's just another display screen, again, for all warehouses or selected warehouse. I can select my item from here. You can actually open this screen from not only the comparison monitor that we were looking at, but from the sales order screen as well as the purchase order screen. Um, so I'm going to select an item. And of course, depending on where you're pulling it from, it's going to have that item selected already. And here we can see purchases due in. So I have a lot of open purchase orders that haven't been received yet. This shows me all of my purchases received or my packouts posted. So this is basically making up what I have in inventory right now. If I have any open orders that this item is attached to, whether they've been committed or not, it will show any open orders. And then if I have any sales history, so any sales orders that have already been shipped, I can go ahead and see that information and I can specify how far back I want to see for those sales orders. And then, of course, in the middle, I have a lot of those same calculations we have been seeing. The on hand, the committed, no drill down opportunity in here. However, I do get to drill down on other information like the purchase orders. So if I click on the purchase order, I can open those up and see the lot information. And same thing on sales order, I could click on that and open up the sales order information. But total on hand available, open purchase. So it gives you your totals down here, which leads into our available to sell. All right. Lot display can be really useful if you know your lot numbers or your item code. So there's no selection here, so just bear that in mind. But if you know your item code or your lot number that you're looking for, I can go ahead and choose show all received lots, show lots received after a certain date, uh, or only show lots with inventory on hand. But when I choose what I want to show, it will show me that lot number up here at the top, and it will show me any transactions that it is tied to. So here I can see a posted physical inventory, here posted physical inventory, but it will also show you any sales transactions, packouts, anything like that. So it's just another way of seeing that information, but it is per item, uh, well, per item and per lot. All right. And the last one is the warehouse, which is pretty much the flash screen that we saw earlier. So it just brings you directly into that flash screen without opening up the item master. So you can go in and select items from there to look at and see all that information. All right. So that is essentially the inventory, item master, and display screens. We covered a little bit more than expected, went a little bit longer, but I hope it was helpful. I hope that we've opened up a few doors for you to track your inventory a little bit better, or just kind of take a look at your inventory while operating in the system and make it a little bit easier for you. Thank you, everybody who is listening to this. We thank you for everything that you've done for our business. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you on another training. Thank you, and have a good one.